Imagine staring down a massive army of tanks, only to realize every single one of them is made of rubber and filled with air. This was the Ghost Army, a secret unit of artists who spent World War II tricking enemies into fighting nothing but shadows. They didn't win with bullets, they won with paintbrushes and giant balloons. But how did that even happen? Welcome to History Bites, where we take the wildest, weirdest, most jaw-dropping moments in history and explain them fast. If you love the kind of history that sounds impossible but actually happened, subscribe. The year is 1944. This is about 80 years before you were born, or roughly the time your great-grandparents were starting their first jobs. The world is in total chaos. The Allied forces are preparing for the biggest invasion in human history to take back Europe from the Nazis. But there is a massive problem. The German army is incredibly strong, and they are watching every move. If the Allies land their boats in the wrong place, the war could be over in a single afternoon. The Allies need a distraction. They need to make the Germans look left while they punch from the right. Imagine your school is having a massive water balloon fight. You want to win, so you set up a row of cardboard cutouts of students on one side of the playground to draw all the fire, while your actual team sneaks around the back. That is exactly what the United States military decides to do on a massive, global scale. There's one part of this story that historians still argue about. I'll get to it. Who do you call when you need to fake an entire army? You don't call the toughest commandos or the best snipers. You call the art students. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, known as the Ghost Army, is made up of 1,100 painters, actors, architects, and sound engineers. These guys are recruited from top art schools in New York and Philadelphia. Their job isn't to take out enemy bunkers. It's to put on a high-stakes theater performance in the middle of a war zone. Here's the part nobody puts in textbooks. These men are basically the special effects team for the entire war. Their primary weapon is the inflatable tank. These are not like the cheap pool floats you use in the summer. These are high-quality rubber shells that, from a distance or from a spy plane high in the sky, look exactly like a 30-ton Sherman tank. Imagine if you could carry a whole garage full of cars in the back of one truck and build a massive parking lot in 20 minutes. That is what they did. They would inflate hundreds of these tanks using air compressors, then use paint to add rust, mud, and even fake serial numbers to make them look battle-worn. Stop and think about that for a second. These artists are sitting in a field, surrounded by what looks like a terrifying armored division, but if a bird lands on a tank too hard, the whole thing might pop. But the trickery doesn't stop with things you can see. The Ghost Army also uses sonic deception. They have giant, 500-pound speakers mounted on the back of trucks. These aren't for music. They play massive weatherproof record players spinning sounds of tanks' engines, soldiers shouting, and the clanking of metal treads. These sounds can be heard 15 miles away. To a German scout sitting in the dark woods at night, it sounds like an entire division of thousands of men is moving in to attack. It is the ultimate prank, except the stakes are life and death. By the way, here is a quick fact. Vikings didn't actually have horns on their helmets. That is just something costume designers made up for operas hundreds of years later. Now this is where history gets genuinely strange. The Ghost Army also uses atmosphere. This is the part where the actors really shine. They send soldiers into local French towns wearing the patches and uniforms of famous, elite fighting units. They drive around in circles in trucks with fake markings to make it look like a massive convoy is passing through. They even go into local cafes and talk loudly about secret orders, knowing that spies might be listening. It is like a group chat where everyone is intentionally lying just to see who repeats the gossip. And here's where it gets really wild. The Ghost Army is often operating just a few miles away from the actual front lines. They have almost no real weapons. If the German army realizes the tanks are fake and decides to charge, these 1,100 artists are completely defenseless. They are essentially using vibes and balloons to hold back one of the most dangerous militaries in history. Most people don't know this part, But the Ghost Army's biggest test comes in 1945 during the crossing of the Rhine River. The Allies need to get across this massive river into Germany, but it is heavily guarded. The Ghost Army sets up a dummy operation. They deploy hundreds of inflatable tanks and planes. They blast their speakers all night long. They create so much fake radio chatter that the German High Command becomes convinced this is the main attack. They move an entire army corps, thousands of real soldiers and real artillery, to face the rubber balloons. While the Germans are staring at the inflatables, the actual US Army crosses the river miles away with almost zero resistance. And the craziest thing, it actually worked. The most jaw-dropping moment happens when two German scouts actually stumble upon the Ghost Army while they are moving. The scouts see four American soldiers pick up a 30-ton Sherman tank and simply turn it around by hand. The scouts are so confused, they don't even report it. They assume they have finally lost their minds from the stress of the war. They couldn't wrap their brains around the idea that an army would bring balloons to a tank fight. The Ghost Army participated in over 20 different operations. For decades after the war, their story was kept a total secret. The men weren't allowed to tell their families what they did. They couldn't brag about their battles because technically the battles never happened. It wasn't until the 1990s that the government finally declassified the files. Historians now estimate that these 1,100 artists saved between 15,000 and 30,000 lives by tricking the enemy into shooting at air instead of people. This moment matters today because it proves that being the strongest or having the biggest guns isn't always how you win. Sometimes, the person with the best imagination is the one who changes the world. It shows that creativity is a tool just as powerful as any machine. History is full of moments that sound impossible, but every single one of them actually happened. That's what makes it better than fiction. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. We post every week, and every video will teach you something your history teacher hasn't mentioned yet. And drop your answer in the comments. If you had to create a ghost army today using modern technology like drones or holograms, what is the first thing you would try to fake? The Ghost Army proved that in the middle of the world's most violent conflict, a paintbrush could be more effective than a machine gun.